Hi guys. My name is Francesca, and for the month of November, I chose the book Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. And the way I found this book is that I was browsing through the internet trying to find a good book with an appropriate challenge. And then when I read the description for this one and read a couple of reviews, I decided to give it a try. The hook for this novel was the story of the courageous um, woman. So the book is about two women, and we'll talk about them later. And I love reading about like courageous women who did things that only men were expected to do, and they went above expectations and helped other people. And the book does exactly this. Um, as soon as you start reading, I knew that this was a good book for me. Okay, so the story is about the protagonist, and the protagonist is Verity, who goes by the name. Verity is like a code name because during the war you can't use your real name for like security reasons. And so Verity was arrested by the Gestapo during the Second World War. They forced her to write everything she knew about the war, the war against the Germans, like secret groups, activities, and like what the plans of the Allies were and stuff like that. And then she agreed, and she wrote about her best friend Maddie and how they worked together. Maddie was a pilot, and Verity was like her best friend, and they worked together, and she was a spy. So Verity is like the narrator of the first part of the book, while Maddie is the narrator for the second part of the book. So like this is part of the challenge for this book. So the challenge for this book was the literary challenge. So this book goes back and forth in time. So since it's like written in the first person, Verity like talks about her life in prison, and then she switches back and forth with her story of what happened previously. And sorry, and it can get confusing at times because it can switch like fairly fast between paragraphs. And so to really understand, I have to like sometimes reread to make sure like I understood that part and to understand what was going on. So as I mentioned before, the narrator for the first half of the book is Verity, while the second half of the book is Maddie. So this can cause a conflict also, because we learned that Verity was writing what Verity wrote to her captors was not all the truth. She like made up most of the story so they wouldn't know all of what they thought they would know. And so Maddie is the one who like writes everything that actually happened. So then we see that Verity did not they only made up stories so that the captors wouldn't know all the information, and yeah, it would be during the war. That's what you have to do, I guess. And for me to read this book, I really have to reread some parts just to make sure that I understand what's going on. Yeah. Okay, so just to give you an example of how it changes, I chose on this one. So on page 63, this is when she's in prison, and she's just describing like her captors and something. I think there was like a narrate, and then she just keeps on talking about it. And then on page 64, the next page, it goes like back in time, and then she explains a narrate that happened when she was still with Maddie and the rest of the crew at the like where they like all gathered. So to keep track of the story, you have to remember where she was when she left off of the previous story. So like when she's describing the story, and where she left off in like the real, what she's experiencing now. So yeah, this is my video. I hope you enjoyed, and see you next time.